And we're live. Welcome back, Northreach, to another episode of The Chopping Block, the only Amtgard podcast that's living proof it doesn't need to be crazy to get involved in Amtgard politics, but it helps. As always, I'm your host, Hars, and sadly, Ray won't be with us this week because she's currently venturing in the bizarre world of Canada, but she should be back next week, and assuming she doesn't get eaten by a bear or drowned in poutine or whatever they do in Canada. But with me subbing in, I have a former guest, Deli.
Hey, yo.
And I was gonna say this was gonna be sort of a special episode, as we had two monarchs competing for, as we had two people competing for the title of Kingdom Monarch, but one recently stepped out, but we still decided to have him for the ride. Welcome, Hunter.
Hadley doodly.
I should say welcome back, because we got at least two people that have been on the show before. And lastly, our other candidate, I don't want to say other candidate, because it just sounds super... Only candidate,
well,
now, yeah.
That no confidence.
Oh yeah, that no confidence, but his track record is not unblemished, but it's still pretty bad. Anyway, welcome, Nalerian.
Hello.
Now, before we start in this, I would like just to apologize in advance that if my acoustics sound a little different, that's because I spent this last week moving out of my cardboard box to a bigger, slightly roomier cardboard box. So if things sound a little different, that's why.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's a very nice box. It has a little opening slot so I can receive mail, and yeah.
I too enjoy living in boxes.
For real. So how have you guys all been?
Been pretty good.
I'm overly busy. It's pretty exciting time.
So is that why you ended up stepping out, just because work suddenly dialed it up to 11?
Nope. I guess I can go into that a little bit. I stepped down because I feel like I could be more of an asset, working from the crowd, essentially. I kind of felt as Monarch that my hands were tied a lot because I kind of had to play a politician, and as much as political science and stuff like that interests me, and I actually enjoyed the position, it's not going to be a as productive position to be in a Kingdom Monarch seat than I could be able to just being able to freelance everything.
Better be the Jafar than the Sultan in this case.
Better to be the Strider than the Aragon.
Okay, that works too.
My hands will not be nearly as tied up.
He's going to be my plant in the crowd.
Could say that.
Wow, I was making a joke.
Or the thorn in your side.
I was joking about how this whole two-party system's rigged, but wow, isn't that topical?
We secretly know they're both in the same.
Don't blame me. I voted for no confidence.
I think at one point we were threatening to vote for each other to put the other person into the position.
All I think of is that Treehouse of Horror episode of The Simpsons where the two aliens were posing as Bill Clinton and that other guy he was running with, I can't remember the name of, but they were running. Yeah, something like that. But then they reveal themselves to be aliens. Fine, won't vote for either of you. Good luck. It's a two-party system.
Yeah, I remember that episode. It was pretty funny. I don't think it was Al Gore, come to think of it. I think it might have been...
Bob Dole.
Who was running against Clinton? Bob Dole.
Yeah, that episode was more relevant today than I think it was 20 years ago when it first came out.
Yeah, but instead of aliens, we got lizard people.
Yeah, that's true. Well, enough talk about politics. Let's talk about politics. So, we got a pretty hefty list of questions here for you guys. But, let me see here. So, this first one we got here is from Ray, and she asks, what strengths do you both bring to office that... Well, I guess we kind of touched on this a little bit, but what strengths do you bring to the office, and what weaknesses do you see that you need to work around?
So, Hunter, what strengths are you bringing to your office?
I'm not bringing any strength to an office, but in the scheme of things, I guess we can break this down into kind of what I think is important within Kingdom Monarch. And for what the big thing is, make sure your officers, your top 5, and then we're branching down out to your regional guys. Make sure they got what they need. I mean, we have a budget. We need to make sure that if we got this crazy wild idea, let's figure out how to get it funded. As it's not so much a top down thing as a bottom, like, hey, help us out with this, and then being available to help out making those things happen.
Interesting. And your rebuttal, Nalerian?
It's not really a rebuttal. I guess I kind of agree. So jumping back to kind of the question specifically, the strength that I guess I would bring to the office would be, that I've been around Amtgard for quite a long time. At least I was around it when it was centered up in Fairbanks, before we grew into, a principality and subsequently a kingdom. My first day really back was our first day as a kingdom. But so I've got a bunch of time, from that bygone era, and then a bunch of personal life experience between now and then, leading up to now. And I guess the weaknesses would also kind of shine through with that, in that I haven't been around as much except for the last year, so I didn't get to see you guys grow into a principality, form it, and then grow from a principality into a kingdom. I missed all of that. But with that, I also would argue for some folks that I bring a different or a fresh perspective, and that I'm not necessarily, holding to old traditions, be they, good or bad. And so I will be looking for, assistance from other folks, assuming that you all decide that you have confidence in my ability to help fulfill that position for everyone. And anyways, I'd be looking for guidance and help from folks that have been around and would like to see certain traditions, continued. But at the same time, I'm not necessarily stuck with those old viewpoints if there are things that we need or want to change going forward in the future.
Pretty solid, I'd say.
So, Nalerian, tell me about a time you had more work than you could finish by a set deadline. What action did you take, and what were the results? This question's from Minnie.
I guess I could make the joke that right now that might be happening with, you have a list of, 12 crown quals that you plan to enter, and they are not all going to get done in the correct amount of time. But just like in other scenarios, with work and, other things that have happened, you just start to prioritize, what's actually important, and identify what you can accomplish and what you can complete, and just do the best you can, and pick up the pieces and clean up what you can afterwards if, things don't, go well.
How are crown quals going? That question comes from Nalerian.
I mean, that guy's a jerk. No, they're coming. So I think that there will be enough finished, by the time that they need to be. And hopefully, if I do decide to do any cooking, I don't kill anybody with my cooking.
I understand that struggle completely.
Yeah, those are always the parts I always get the most stressed out over in terms of running for office.
I'm really looking forward to the idea of, revisiting what our crown quals are, what they mean, and what our goals and objectives are for them, for our officers going forward. I almost want to bounce that back as a question to Deli.
Oh man, currently we have a committee that is currently looking into that, and it's quite interesting seeing what other kingdoms have come up with. Some look really bad, and some look interesting.
I'm excited for crown quals. I need to get another Hydra. I need more awards under my belt.
Great, another Hydra.
Give me awards.
Hunting.
Give me awards. Hey, at least awards here are earned, right?
That's true.
Hashtag earned not given.
Yeah, I mean, it could be worse. You could just make a bunch of leather braces and suddenly be given a serpent knighthood. Like,
I would be severely disappointed if, like, somebody got elected king and they're like, "Oh, I really like Hunter. You're a knight now." I'd be like, "Dude, I didn't earn that unless I actually earned it." Dude, I would be legitimately mad. Like, how dare you?
well,
You know, just do that.
Hunter. If you do that though, you have the perfect chance to make the ultimate political message by ripping the belt off and just like stepping on it, and then spitting on it and just lighting it on fire. Just show them how you feel it. Don't just tell them how you feel, show them how you feel.
You could. And honestly, I probably wouldn't put down that much of a display, but I'd essentially do that. I wouldn't accept this award unless I earned it.
It might just be because might just be the inner wizard in talking for me, but when you want to go extra, you go big or go home.
So Nalerian, Hunter and Hars both were talking about how we have a really high standard when it comes to awards compared to the rest of Amtgard, and I think a lot of that comes from our Dragonspine roots. What are you gonna do to make sure we stay having these consistently high bar? Do you think that bar is too high, too low? What do you think?
So, having been around for the last year, there's been a few discussions I've had with some folks because, for example, there's a lot more what's now referred to as paragons than I was used to or would have expected considering my absence. And sometimes I space how long I had stepped out of Amtgard, but it just surprised me how many paragons there were, because I was used to when we were, basically a satellite park of Dragonspine way up in Alaska, how there were so few of those folks that were recognized in that way. And back then it was called Masterhood, in a class. But so I'm not necessarily foreign to the idea of having high standards for those awards. And as far as the plan going forward, I would obviously lean on the local folks, that are the officers for each of the regional parks, and at least at the beginning, since the term is a year long, it's going to be quite a process, and so I'll see a lot more stuff going on, and be submerged in that environment a lot more than I am currently or was for the last year. But anyways, I would be leaning on those regional folks to begin with, and trusting their instincts.
So I'm currently the only person running for the Guildmaster of Paragons right now, so this issue is kind of dear to my heart, I guess you could say. Paragon's one of those capstone awards we give out, and it's kind of interesting that you said there's a lot more now than when you were used to play. I think it's kind of interesting too, because Lupin Moon has a lot of Paragons compared to the other parks. Like, for instance, Icefire Bay has none, Froco has, I think, 2, and Astral Winds has 2 since I started playing. So what I would say, like, modern, new Northreach style, I think there's only been 2. And let's see, I think there's only 1 in Ravenstone. So
actually, 2 now. Nox from Astral Winds recently moved there.
Oh, nice.
Wait, Nox as in Donald Wiggins?
I think so. I've been away from Ravenstone for a while, so I'm not 100% with names all the time. So, but I'm pretty sure that's who it was.
I don't believe that's true. I'm friends with Nox, the Donald Wiggins, the Master Assassin, and as far as I understand, he is still up in Fairbanks because he just showed where his employment was, and that's I know that place up in Fairbanks.
Oh, okay.
There is a guy named, I think, Nyx, N-Y-X, if I am remembering that correctly, who just moved from Fairbanks down, and he's not Paragon yet, as far as I know.
Okay, that's who it was.
So another similar award would be Knighthood when it comes to like a capstone award or Masterhood, and currently Northreach has not made one in the last year since we became a kingdom. How do we define excellency? How do we set that bar for the first time since we don't have a person to compare to?
To say
can
that we
actually
don't...
touch
Sorry,
on
go
this a little bit. I'm actually really excited. I'm going down to Vegas here in August, and I'm going to go visit the guys down in the Desert Winds. That's the name of their kingdom. And I got in touch. I can't remember the name of the park. Let me see here. I'll pull it up on the org. The Desert Winds and their park in Las Vegas, Terra de Votum. I think that's how you say that. Anyway, I got in touch with those guys down there, and I said, please bring me all of your warlords and serpent knights so I can see what that style of stuff is. So I'm going to be able to bring back a little bit of a report and be like, yeah, let's, we got, an idea of, what constitutes that level of achievement.
All right. Well, getting back to some of the questions that we have here. This next one we have is from Drake, and he asks, "What would you like to do or see happen that you think has the least amount of public support out of the things you'd like to do or see happen?"
Most of the things that I think I've suggested so far haven't necessarily seen opposition, but one that I've only really talked to folks locally about is basically I wanted to go through the kingdom and effectively, time allowing, do an internal audit of our processes and how everything is done from top to bottom. And in doing so, the point is to, we've been a kingdom for a year, or we will be, by the time either that no confidence guy or myself fall into that position. And at that point, I think after a year in, it's a good time to stop, and think about what's worked, what hasn't, what can we clean up, what can we make more efficient, and, what needs changing. And along that process, the other thing I want to do is, I don't have a good term for this, and I think Hunter was there the last time I tried to say something about it, but I want to create what I have, and this is going to kill me as soon as I say it, but for lack of a better term, a true admin manual. But
I think we were referring to it as an officer handbook, just a little bit more details beyond what would be included in the admin manual. A lot more in depth and how to communicate with your officers and things like that.
So an actual how-to guideline as opposed to just explaining what we do?
Right. Well, and also including what we do, but in more detail than, should be put into a corpora. It's something that, some jobs kind of have a, standard operating procedure kind of book that they get to refer to, and do it all the way from the bottom all the way up to the top. And, maybe include a log, like a system where, these are the things that were encountered in this position, this is how it was handled, and maybe a little bit of why, if it makes sense contextually. And that's, again, this is all like time allowing and, with officer cooperation.
Currently, we have like the Book of War and like ANS documents that the regents are in charge of. Do you think this can be built off of those, or is this like a separate document altogether?
I mean, it could be. I would almost say this is a separate document, but then that those components almost become a part of it. But those things should almost continue to stand alone as separate things that get to be referenced, because those pieces, not that anything that we would create would necessarily be internal only, but those other documents are very public, and you really want everybody to stop and look at, like, the Book of War and, the ANS stuff.
So personally, like, whenever I entered an office, I think it'd be incredible if I had even just a 3-page summary of what this job entails and expectations and where people went wrong. I think that'd be incredible, especially for newer people entering office for the first time. I think that's great.
Yeah, and especially with a key list of important dates to watch out for that are specialized for each individual office, what to watch out for, and then maybe a ghosted version of what your co-officers, if you're in a regional position, what dates that they're watching, that they have to deal with, and ways that you could help them, or ways that other officers in the past have been able to contribute or help to support their fellow officers.
One thing that Gord and I have discussed, and I think it's probably going to see more opposition than even moving indoors. I think that was something that Goran got a lot of pushback before. It was just kind of standard practice about paying a site fee to pay for a gymnasium so we can play in the winter. But we want to get to the point where we don't have to do our sale offers anymore, which I think is a good idea because honestly, it's a lot of work. And but I'd like to get to the point where we can purchase in bulk. We can even get other Amtgard kingdoms involved in it. Just trying to get product moved. So maybe we don't need to order 10,000 buffers. Maybe we can get 10 other kingdoms to buy 1,000 of them, and they can sell them just the way we do at the state fair and things like that. But in the meantime, until we can get to that point, I'd like to see a new position open up, which would be a regional engineer, and they would have 2 tasks. And that would be one, they're in charge of making sure that loaner gear and stuff like that is maintained. And the other side of things is they would be the regional counterpart to the Guildmaster of Engineers, and they would help, crank out stuff that we have for sale at State Fair and things like that. So basically our sale items. And if every park did like 10 boffs a month, and you could probably adjust that for population and whatnot, but 10 boffs a month from each kingdom, we would have everything that we would need all year.
Do you feel like if that was distributed across the regions that there might be more time for the Guildmaster of Engineers to be able to do the other components of their position, the more exciting ones, like actually designing things that we could use internally and not just stuff for sales?
Oh, absolutely. But as of right now, that being in that position, it's it's eating up a lot of my time and a lot of my patience. Honestly, it's hard to get around managing stuff between Anchorage and Palmer, because we got stuff stored in Palmer, and I got a bunch of people out here, and I got stuff stored in Anchorage. I got a bunch of people out here in Palmer that are making covers, and people in Anchorage that are making covers, and I tried to spread it out, but it's kind of been pulling my hair out trying to get everything to come together. Right now, I've got guys down in Kenai who are working on stuff, and I'm trying to get guys up in Astral Winds working on stuff too. And if we can get to that point where everybody's doing a little bit, that also leaves room for everybody to do a lot of the fun stuff. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, and I also just want to take a moment to applaud you for your efforts, because I've watched you, lose some of your hair over this, and you had a lot more to spare than I did, but still.
Right.
Yeah.
Guildmaster Engineer seems like a really cool position when just outlined in our admin manual or whatever, because it seems like you're just like the small project manager, and that's really cool. Like, hey Hunter, here's $500, make us a dragon, sort of thing. But seeing you actually doing it for the first time, it sounds more like grueling short sword making work, which sounds unfun and lame. Like,
I was gonna say, like, what I've seen the Guildmaster of Engineers have to do so far almost seems like borderline sweatshop work, so I honestly commend you for doing that, Hunter, because it's not something I could have done.
Well, I've had a lot of really good help this year so far. We did have some problems with stuff not quite getting glued, but fortunately, that's been handled. Everything we've kicked out since Run Fair has been super solid, so we still have assets to work with. We have quite a few more events this year that we're selling bops at, because we were going to do Highland Games up here in Palmer. That kind of fell through. But we did do 4th of July Parade down in Kenai, and we did Highland Games down in Homer just this last week. And, as more things open up, we'll be able to move those things around. But as far as getting things done, the more you can spread it out, and the more centralized you can organize things in a region, the better off you'll be.
Nalerian, how do we give future hunters like more tools and more like a reward system, for actually helping, so he doesn't have to make them all himself? How do we make a Guildmaster of Engineers who have to make all these short swords life easier?
I actually have a solution for that I wanted to implement after the elections. I was going to bring it up to Nalerian, but I just wanted to make sure that I made it past crown walls and stuff like that before I started trying to implement any kind of new stuff or bringing up new stuff or organizing anything. But we pay people a little bit for their work, and we say, like, make cover passes, you get $1. Make a buffer, passes, you get $1. And, you know, that eats $2 off of each individual buffer, but, you know, I'm sure some people would be like, hey, man, I make 20 covers in a night, I got, you know, money to go do whatever. I've got extra income just by sitting on the couch and doing this stuff. You know what I mean?
We could also go, like, make 10 swords, get one free, like...
I think, any regular member probably is going to be like, or I could just spend the $30 and, you know, get a Goran blade. I think they're more than $30, but you can buy the materials for relatively cheap.
Well, I was going to say, both Goran and Warlord Sports in general have pretty not cheap swords that'll last you.
The buffers that we're selling as of now, they're not made for your go-to Amtgarder. They're made for kids who want to hit their brothers and sisters and parents, and they're going to get left out in the rain, and, you know, they're going to be done. And if we see the membership coming back because of it, that's great. But I bet if they're coming back, they're probably going to want to get better, higher-end stuff eventually. So the idea is just make it as cost-effective as possible.
Alright, well, getting back to some of our other questions we got here, this next one we got is from Minnie, and he asks, what does the concept of personal accountability mean to you, and how do you incorporate it into your day?
I feel like I'm being singled out now. I thought this was supposed to be two of us that get to answer these questions. No, but personal accountability, I mean, it's really all about owning your actions and, you know, standing up for, you know, what you said, and even if it's a mistake, and owning that and explaining, you know, if you need to, why, you know, you made a decision. And I suppose I incorporate that into my day all the time, between having, you know, kids and the way I try to, you know, interact with my spouse, and also at work, since there's, I'm where the buck stops for work for the stuff that I do.
Personal accountability is everything, and if you're in charge, it's, you know, you not only gotta take accountability for yourself, but if, you know, something goes wrong, it's probably coming down on your head too, so you gotta be accountable for that as well.
Ain't that the truth?
It is. I promise.
Now, trust me, I know. That's what I ended up learning during my last term as Monarch.
I mean, just to throw this out there, though, too, it doesn't mean that you necessarily are going to always get everything right. And it's being able to learn from the mistakes that you make. You know, it's a quote very roughly and poorly, and it's hardly even a quote, more of a reference. You know, Captain Picard, you know, you can play the most perfect game, you can make no mistakes and still lose.
I remember that. I like that quote. That's not losing, that's just life.
So, Nalerian, we've been talking about getting our 501c3 for a while, more than a few years, actually, but it hasn't happened yet. And for those who don't understand, 501c3 is a classification of nonprofit that's different than what we have now. There's a bunch of benefits for having some, mainly taxes-wise. But Richter wanted to know what you would do to actually get this status, and how would you maintain it?
So that one, actually, okay, so jumping back, this might be the somewhat controversial answer or approach that I'm going to take to that versus what some folks, you know, talk about or how they view it. Because my view on this is that as I step into the position, I'm going to stare at this and assess the reasons between why we haven't yet completed it or acquired it, and what does acquiring it actually mean, with liability and everything else, and then bring that information that I find to the group. And from there, I think that we need to really decide if we want to go forward. Because what I've been hearing somewhat recently, as I've started to ask other folks about this, is it might not be as clear-cut of a thing that we want to, as a group, go for yet. There's a chance that some of the issues surrounding it and the liability involved with having one of these classifications may not be something that the group is ready for.
I've been having concerns about similar things, mostly regarding like how do we really qualify, and do we need to like mandate ANSs? Kind of like the Boy Scouts or Scouts of America or whatever name they're going by now, but I think they have their 501c3 status because they are educators, they teach. And are we on that same level to have that same kind of status?
Actually, that can kind of tie into this next question that I think you could probably use to better explain why you think that way, the way you do about it. And that is the question from Minnie, who asks, how can you ensure that the point you're trying to get across makes it through? Can you tell me about a time that someone just wasn't getting it?
Should that one jump to me, or did Hunter want to further explain?
These questions aren't really directed towards any one person, so really you could both answer all of these.
I guess I'm not really understanding Minnie's question here, and is there any context to it?
It just asks, like... You go ahead, Deli.
So when you're a monarch, especially like Nalerian did right there, he looked at something that was very common thought of like, oh yeah, we should get our our 501c3, and he said, wait a second, we should actually look at this. And a lot of times you have to address your public with a new idea, and a lot of times they don't understand, or you're not telling them correctly in a way that they would understand. So a big art of being a monarch is, how do I communicate my thoughts with my populace? And I think that's what Minnie's asking right now.
I'm terrible at communicating. I usually have to explain myself 14 different ways before I get everybody's attention. But no, I think for one, you got to be a little bit charismatic to be able to explain your point. But the other side of things is that we need to understand that not everybody's communicating the same thing, or maybe they're like me and they don't communicate what they're trying to say very well. So a little bit of understanding from the populace also goes a long way. Like, that's not really what I was getting at when I said that. Sorry for the miscommunication, that kind of stuff.
So jumping in there, there's two ways I want to answer it. The first one is kind of a strategy, and then the other one is, where did my strategy come from, as far as like how have I kind of developed it over my lifetime. And I kind of want to jump on that second question first. And that's so I have a computer science degree, and one of the interesting components of that idea of software development is translating the idea of what a client wants, and turning that into what can a programmer do for the client. And that can sound simple, but it's its own art, and it is a very can be a very complicated thing depending on the client. And that's the more interesting aspect of the degree that I ended up walking out with. I mean, you learn how to program, you learn how to think logically, and all that kind of stuff. And I certainly walked out with that. I've got my degree, got the certificate sitting, or, the diploma sitting somewhere. But the thing that I ended up doing for work, and the part that I found most interesting, was bridging that gap between people, between the people and what can be created. What's the solution? First, identifying their problem, and then coming up with the solution for them. Sorry, block out the cough there. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Deli.
I was typing, so my mouth lit up.
Oh, okay, sorry. So anyways, so for work, I also have to translate currently. One aspect of my job is I have to help translate what academics are writing, economists, and trying to make that consumable by all of Alaskans. And it's not something that's that easy, and I haven't been doing too much of it yet recently, but that is going to be amping up my job here very quickly. And so, anyways, that's coming down professionally. And then as far as what I actually want to do and like what strategies I try to do, and especially relating it back to the 501c3, I'm gonna, the idea is to do all the research, try to come up with all of the data and all the information that you can, and boiling it down to the important and relevant facts to the target audience, and present it in the most clean, clear, concise way that is possible, and then answering questions and adjusting, the responses and stuff, and tailoring them to folks' understanding of what you've presented, and whatever follow-up they may need to understand what you're trying to communicate.
I think that relates really well because when you're designing, you kind of know everything, right? And you have to relook at it in a manner that you don't know anything yet, right? And a lot of our populace isn't able to go into these meetings that have sensitive information and such, or they're just not paying attention to the world politics that's going on because it's so much. So I think it's really cool that you have experience doing that sort of thing.
Yeah, hopefully it ends up being useful.
Yeah, I'm hoping this goes through well. I mean, as with our Kingdom contract, we have to behave like a non-profit, and I'm hoping that we can get that all sorted out so that we can actually have that status, because there are a lot of benefits that come along with it. We just got to make sure all our ducks in a row so we don't lose it, because stuff's not cheap.
Absolutely, and I just want to clarify for anybody that might be listening, I'm not against getting the 501c3. I'm just trying to be a little cautious because it feels like at least the last year I haven't been able to digest a lot of information surrounding it, and so I want to make sure that it just makes sense before I give it my full support and or my signature, because I believe at the end of the day you have to really vouch for it personally, and this is goes beyond Amtgard. You really throw a personal stake into it, and I'm willing to do that for the group, as long as it makes sense for everybody and we all understand the commitment that's required once we do that.
Well, hopefully this goes through right off the bat. I know they're getting ready to submit the application, and I'm hoping the IRS doesn't look at it and be like, well, no, because that would be a bummer. But it's definitely important to make sure that we got all our... Make sure we're behaving properly is what I'm trying to get at here. Sorry, I'm reading something.
All right, well, in the meantime, we can also get into our next question, which we have is from Richter. And we touched on this a little bit earlier in the episode, but he asks, how do you plan to implement your Council of Crowns to better Northreach as a whole? Are there any public plans you have for your reigns to change the status quo?
So the first one that I promised a couple folks was no unnecessary meetings, if possible. No having meetings just for the sake of having meetings. We will certainly have all of the ones that we need to, and make sure that everything's taken care of. But there's been some requests to have fewer meetings, and if possible, I absolutely want to accommodate that. Are there more specific questions or details that anybody wants to ask about?
That's all there was to that question in particular. Deli, do you have the next one?
Yeah, so this one's a little long, but in general, it's a question about how you prioritize issues. So AKAMtgard.com was hacked by a bunch of crazy ads and junk all over the place, but the forums seem fine. Meanwhile, you're poking around in the ledgers and Google Drive and notice that things don't quite add up at first glance, to the tune of around $1,000. But roughly at the same time, a Northreacher PMs you on Facebook accusing another player of violating Code of Conduct number 3. What do you do to prioritize these issues as Kingdom Monarch?
So the first bit is that the website would most likely be delegated to another individual, and I would, inform them of that. I'm assuming these are coming in sequentially as described.
I think you're asking more for priority. So what's the biggest priority? The Code of Conduct violation, the missing $1,000, or the website?
Oh, certainly the Code of Conduct would be the most important thing to address. I guess I was thinking more holistically or, realistically, in the sense that a lot of things would be delegated and that you could, say, hey, Spider, GM of Spiders, check the website, and hey, PM, what's going on with the ledger, and then, follow up with whatever is necessary and whoever you need to talk to, depending on how the Code of Conduct 3 was violated and who it is and where.
Yeah, I think
that's exactly what Minnie was looking for.
Yeah, I think he was more trying to see if whether or not you'd rather fix this problem with a scalpel instead of a hammer. And yeah, I think that's probably what he was looking to see.
Gotta have the right tool for the right job. So, sometimes you gotta lay the smack down. You know what I mean?
The hammer-powered scalpel, though. Come on, guys.
Ooh, I like your attitude on that.
Sounds like a good project buff.
It's definitely a good tool, like a skill to be able to delegate something instead of just doing it yourself. That's one of my main flaws when I was Monarch. I just wanted to finish everything myself because I can trust myself, and I know I can do it at least decently, but a lot of times you spread yourself too thin. So I think it's really important that you're able to say, Guildmasters, Spiders, figure this out while I go over here and figure this out.
Another thing about delegating, it's important to have the right people in the right places, because it can get to the point it's like, you got the wrong person in the wrong place, and all of a sudden nothing's getting done.
And wow, I think this is actually the last given question we have here, but the next one was from you said Donald Wiggins was Nox, right?
Yes, that's Master Nox, yep.
Okay, so Nox asks, what is the toughest call that you ever had to make as a Reeve, and were you comfortable with it afterwards?
So as I was joking with Minnie earlier, I was looking at these questions as they were coming in, and I sat there pondering what he was meaning by using the word toughest for a while, and I think the best story I can come up with regarding this is that, we all make friends, and everybody kind of, to a certain degree, we all have friends that we play these games with, right? Oh, no confirmation from any, but none of you have friends? What's wrong with you people?
I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm too metal to have friends.
Alright, so anyways...
bad name explosion. Anyway.
So anyways, one of my very good friends, had crossed, some lines and needed to be removed from the game. And that, caused some strain on our friendship, which, at the time, I can't even remember what the actual call or specific issue was or what was happening in the game or field. Because, the thing that sticks with you the longest over time is the feelings about something, right? It's not really the specifics of the incident. So... anyways, I just remember that I had to pull him, and I felt horrible, and it did not go well. It was ugly, but and was I comfortable with it afterwards? I mean, immediately afterward, no, I felt terrible, but it was also for the health of the game and for all of the other players that were there, and it needed to happen. And there was some fallout for, a bit of time afterwards, but we're still good friends or best of friends now. So, it wasn't like a friendship ending incident or anything like that. And nor should it be. I mean, that would be ridiculous. And that's just more of an issue with the friendship, if anything. But, in that sense, I guess it shows that, the needs of the many can outweigh the needs of the one, right?
Every once in a while, a
Absolutely.
tough call like that does come up, so it's good to know that you understand the classic Vulcan proverb.
Is that a Vulcan proverb?
Or not a proverb, but like a phrase. I don't even know if it's like. God, now that I think of it, these last couple episodes have been very Star Trek focused. I don't know how I feel about this.
No, we're not doing a Star Trek reign.
Please, no. I'm okay with that.
We get to keep our blasters.
No. Make the blasters go away. They're so overpowered.
So Richter, so Nalerian, there's another question from Richter. He asked, do you have any plans to add technology to our operational budget?
I'm sorry, I was looking for that question because I couldn't quite hear you. Can you repeat it?
Richter asks, do you have any plans to add technology to our operational budget?
Add technology to our operational budget. Is that is the question allocating funds to technology? Is that what we're asking?
Yeah, and I'm unsure what actual technology he's looking for. I assume since he's like the Guildmaster Reeves, he might be talking about like online resources maybe, but I'm unsure.
Okay, so I guess I'll just try to approach it from that standpoint. And I do think that we need to fund some things that may be either underfunded or not funded at all currently, and or just make sure that certain things. So, for example, from the Reeves, since I'm currently the Lupin Moon's GMR, one thing that I've seen is that we were all asked to move to this online reef testing system, but unfortunately, we don't have any money allocated to the system, so it's not paid for. So we're using it in a free /demo /debugging or testing mode right now. And what that means is that we have no record internally into the system of the tests that are taken. And so we have this, workaround where we take screenshots and yada yada, and we make it work. But that seems kind of like we're halfway into that process. And so I would like to see it completed if that's the direction that we as a group want to go. And it seems like a great option as a GMR. It's a great option. I think there's some things that we need to tweak about it, and as far as like who has access to the questions and how it's done. But it'll be a very awesome thing, and we need to allocate. If the money's side is appropriate, we should allocate the money and funds to make that happen and official and do it 100% all the way. The other thing would be website and communication. I've got some, plans, and I want to work with the, others that are interested in this. If there's other people that want to be the Gym of Spiders, I know Blue has been working on some things in the background. And if he wants to continue in that position, I want to work with him. But I have some plans of where I think we need to head towards with as far as like the website and our communication platform. One of those things is that Facebook is very awesome and it works very well for what it is, but things get lost in it. So it should not be the only place to find our official announcements. I think that we need a more robust website and platform to deliver informational content in a in a better way that's easier, so that people don't miss important things like the Crown Qualifications post.
Does that mean hiring somebody?
No, not necessarily. I certainly have the skill set. That's one of the base things that I've done for my job. I almost did it as a crown qual, but for numerous reasons I decided not to, and that's why I'm holding off and wanting to work with somebody. And for relatively cheap, we could, have the server outsourced, sitting on a VPS out in the world. And that could be, for as little as like $100-$120 a year, which for the going rates, that's fairly trivial for anybody that doesn't know. Or we could also host it internally. I run servers, other members run servers, and we could just test it out and see what's needed. But I think we already are spending some money on hosting a server, so it's not like we're assigning funds that aren't already being assigned to this. So yeah, that might be a tricky one where I'm not necessarily delegating. I might have my hands very much in the pot, helping shape this this new system into place. But rest assured, it will not be my only focus, and I know when to walk away if necessary.
That's fair. Before I get into this next part, Deli, is there any other questions that I overlooked there by mistake?
So I have a couple extra just because I went to your specific LOI posts for Hunter and Nalerian. So I just have one more from Minnie, but that's it.
Okay, if you want to ask that, then we can do that before we start lightning rounding.
All right. So can you tell me about a time that you've dealt with a delicate or difficult situation in an open and honest manner?
Could you repeat that one more time? I couldn't quite hear you.
Can you tell me about a time you dealt with a delicate or difficult situation in an open and honest manner?
I can't say I've run into one of those in Amtgard. I've worked out deals for, say, in the case of, Wolf's Cry, somebody needs a ticket. Well, here's a free bronze ticket if you, be a serf. That's kind of probably the most extreme situation I've gotten into during my time doing anything. I generally try to avoid dealing with delicate issues out in the open. Maybe that's the wrong way to put that. Maybe I'm not understanding the question.
I guess my mind wandered to the wrong situation to begin with because I focused on dealing with a delicate situation, and I, had to deal with a number of those when I was Monarch up in Astral Winds. Because, there are lots of strong personalities in Amtgard, and there are those that, get rubbed the wrong way from those strong personalities. And I remember having to, bridge some issues and some people into understanding between, the actions of, the actions of some and how it ruffled the feathers of others, and making sure that everybody could, have a good time still. But that's not the heart of the question, the meat of the question, I believe. It was about how do you approach that, out in public, and how do you bring that to light to everybody. And, I'm sure I've dealt with it, I'm sure I've done it, but I'm drawing a blank right now because I'm near the end of my glass of wine, I think.
I guess part of the issue is what constitutes a delicate situation. Is it banning a person, or is it dealing with, somebody who's mad at somebody else because they said or did something to them? I mean, what constitutes delicate?
Well, if you add a cat to the end of my name... Nothing?
Thanks, Deli. Thanks.
I'm
It's
gonna
push to talk.
I'm gonna make a more specific question out of this.
Okay, I had to step out for a second, and the first thing I hear is how do you make something delicate? And then Deli just did a pun with his name. I came back at the best time, apparently.
So, Nalerian, I think every Council of Crowns, nearly everyone, has had to deal with some sort of issue relating to a minor, or some sort of issue that had sensitive information like sexual assault involved. So if your council was given that type of information, how would you deal with that delicate or difficult situation in an open and honest manner?
I think that what you're asking about is really a priority between those words, the open, honest, and delicate. And I think that the priority first is delicate. And a lot of those types of situations, talk about myself as if I'm, doing an interview for a job. But I used to work for the Army, and when I worked for the Army, I worked with youth and children because the Army runs special programs that are similar to Boys and Girls Clubs and stuff like that, or to the daycares and things like that. And so anyways, that was one of my first jobs as an adult, and during that training, they're training you on how to deal with kids and different issues, different things that you might see, and those kids are dealing with things like their parents being deployed in war zones, and the parents coming back and having a hard time adjusting to life, like all the sorts of things that you could imagine that happens with service members. And so, anyways, there's a level of respect, delicacy, and just being able to identify those types of issues and who you can talk to and who you must talk to and who you have to report to. I think Vinny touched on this at one point. I don't remember if this was a public conversation or a private one between him and me, but things like being a mandatory reporter because of our employment. We both work for the university, and those types of things are considerations for us. And so I do work for the university currently, and I am considered a mandatory reporter. But with that, as Hunter could relate, there's a lot of training that has happened because of that sort of thing. And so, anyways, back to the question, because I can ramble, and obviously I've got a little alcohol flowing through me. But anyways, I think delicacy for the individuals that are bringing you the information is of utmost importance and is critical. And keeping the information and the details to those that need to know to make the decisions properly is important. And that does not necessarily mean the populace needs to know everything. And so they can understand that the populace must understand that those of us that are put into these positions are doing the best that they can with the resources and information that they are given, and that they need to trust us to make the best call for the group. And the honest and open component is what comes with that. And so they're only going to be given what they need to know and what we can share, while respecting the privacy and the delicate issues that can come up. Did I use delicate enough for you?
It was the perfect amount.
No, it's a kind of a tough question to answer, because some things you can't be completely candid with. If it involves somebody who needs their identity protecting because they're afraid of backlash, like, you can't just straight up be like, oh yeah, well, this person said this, so you're getting this. It's it's not that cut and dry, and you gotta take it by a case basis. So I guess what I'm getting at is you can't always be delicate and open at the same time.
It's almost like they're a spectrum, and you have to find the right balance between the two. And that depends on the situation and the individuals involved. And all right, Deli, hit us with your other questions. You said you looked at things and you came up with your own special round of stuff, right?
A lightning round, if you will. So pretty much this is usually where I let my co-host I just kind of realized this seems to be something I exclusively let my co-host do, regardless of who it is. Like, first it was Vex, now Ray, and I guess now it's Deli. But basically, I'm kind of just letting him go off his leash and ask him pretty much whatever he wants. So Deli,
man, I got some big shoes to fill.
He was on a leash before? Whoa.
The Deli cat was on a leash.
Okay, I think
Call
I found
me
my
Deli
episode name. Deli Cat.
Now we need a Deli bird.
Anyway, Nalerian, before we go too far, I want to say thank you for volunteering, a large chunk of your time and mental capacity and in life in the next year to, make my life better, make Amtgard better for all of us. I think that's really cool. Also, you too, Hunter, you made a post saying, you just want to be the hands of the organization, and I would have loved that as a Monarch if someone walked up to me and said, I have 2 hands and 6 hours a week. Tell me what to do to make Amtgard better. I think that's super awesome. I want to say thank you to both of you.
Well, I'm glad that you appreciate that, because that honestly goes a long way. Because oftentimes it is a 100% thankless job.
Thank you, and I'm scared, and my wife is giving me funny looks still for this decision. So hopefully I can make it all worth it.
I got your back.
A major part of being a king is you are in charge of the Council of Crowns, which is the monarch from each of our parks. And we've already touched a lot about like the awards they give, but another responsibility of them is banning people, which is a touchy subject. But in the past, we've banned a lot of people for doing things like illegal activity. Also banned people for something called like toxic behavior. What do you consider too toxic where they've reached a point that they need to be banned?
So I guess the first thing would be trying to approach the individual and making sure that they understand what their actions is doing, and what are they doing to the other folks around them in the group that they're participating in. And if they don't show remorse, change, adaptation, then giving them a break from the organization. And that's what I would, in that situation, that's more of what I consider a temporary ban to be, is a break to stop and reassess and think about what they're doing, and whether their participation in the group is something that they and we want to continue. So as far as specifically like what would cause somebody, it would be repeated behavior that detracts from others in a very significant way. Well, I mean, this doesn't necessarily have to be super significant. It could be in a minor way. If you're turning people away and leaving everybody with a sour taste in their mouth, repeatedly, despite conversations and warnings and stuff like that, then taking a break could really be the next step.
For sure, and we've had a lot of members who've come back from 6-month bans or something, who are awesome members, great members of our society, I would say now.
No, that's an important thing to mention, though. Is it's not just major things that can make people want to take a break from you. It's the little things like, oh yeah, if you're constantly being overly aggressive with people, particularly the wrong people, because I set my speed based on who I'm up against, not just one size fits all. And if you're consistently just being kind of a lack of a better word, if you're just kind of being a jerk, like, we don't want you around. And I think that's, once enough common consensus has come around that, like, yeah, maybe you need to step back for a little bit, I'd say that's when it justifies a ban. And depending on how bad it is, or if it's like one really bad instance, it could be indefinite. If it's just like you need to take a break for 3 months, then you need to go take a break for 3 months.
I think we both would agree, like, if someone is doing or did like an illegal activity which puts them at risk for our organization or its members, that they shouldn't be involved in our organization. But how much proof do you need for one of those things? Do you require them to be convicted? Are you willing to act purely on hearsay and people just saying this happened?
I'm not a big fan of letting I'm a big fan of guilty or innocent until proven guilty, because I think that's just right. It's better to be judged by 12 than carried by 6, or however that old saying goes. But there does come a time when it's if enough people are coming forward, like, can you do something about this, then that's definitely a good sign that you need to review the situation, and you need to do it in a very thorough manner.
I mean, it's always easy when it's very definitive if something's happening and somebody's doing something, or somebody did something very tangible or specific, and you were there, or everybody there's no discerning opinion about what happened, or whatever. But I also think that most folks, on the slightly less definitive ones, you could get a conversation with them, and through that conversation, I would hope to identify remorse, regret, whether it happened, what's going on. There's almost always more of a story than just one thing that they did or what happened. And I would hope that through some mediation that, you know, you can come to an arrangement. And it wouldn't be, and I'm not saying all of this to like water down the standards that we've set as a group as far as like what it takes to be a member. But, you know, when you can convince somebody, it's like, it's a good thing that you take a 3-month break, you know, so that you can stop and think about what's going on and what's happening. That is a little bit different versus just, you know, summary judgment out of nowhere when you don't know what's happening and being told don't show up anymore ever again. If I didn't answer your question, though, please ask it again, and I'm willing to take another stab at it.
I think you answered it perfectly. My last question is, what does knighthood mean to you?
That is a tricky, long-winded question that we could talk about for another hour, but I don't think we want to go there. So
I can ask something more specific if you want.
Absolutely do that in just a second, because I have my one summary answer for that is my gold standard. For those of you that know him, is Goldcrest. Well,
we're all screwed.
Right? It's a high standard. So when you were asking me about like, you know, high standards for awards and stuff, I was kind of chuckling to myself.
I think right now we're in a situation where, like, when it comes to like, okay, what's the ideal crown knight? Right, we hit like this crazy high bar. You know, who's the next serpent knight? And we have this like crazy high bar. Who's the warlord? You know, crazy high bar, because it doesn't exist in Northreach. Or I guess crown knights exist in Northreach, but these serpent knights and sword knights just don't exist. So we have these crazy out far bars for them, which is good and bad.
But just because we're a kingdom, does that mean that we need to have a serpent knight or a sword knight?
Doesn't mean that we have to have them, but it'd be nice to have a standard. What dictates this is your level of accomplishment? And I think we know. I think that if we open up with some communications with other kingdoms who have serpent knights and they're, you know, or sword knights, like, you know, let's try to bring sword knights up when we do events if we can afford it, you know, just so people can get a taste of what that feels like. And if we can encourage anybody who gets the opportunity to travel, like, go find a sword knight and fight them and tell them to go full speed so that you have an experience and you know what that level of fighting is. You know, we can get to that point where we can get a standard, but we don't have any standard to go by because we don't have that experience to have that standard set.
It's a good question, though, Nalerian. Like, should our best be our knight? If Hars goes out and wins 4 kingdom level events, crushes everybody, should Hars get his master warrior? Should he get warlord? If Hunter goes out and crushes all the garbing competitions, should he get serpent knight? Is our masterhoods the best in our kingdom, or is it an arbitrary award that goes across Amtgard?
Right, and I mean, as far as like Serpent Knight goes, I don't know if as a group, as a whole, if we're there yet. There are some people that make some fantastic stuff in our group, though. I mean, Deli, not to just sing your praises because you're here, but you've made some fantastic stuff from what I've seen in pictures. Someday I hope to, you know, see what that snake polearm thing, you know, really feels and looks like in person. And then I saw some stuff from, I think it was Frozen Coast last, about 6 months ago. I think it was Roar, if I'm remembering correctly. He did some beautiful submissions to that ANS competition. But as a whole, as a group, I don't know if we're there yet.
Fighting wise too, I assume?
Fighting wise, okay, so I have not done Amtgard outside of Alaska. That I haven't made the trips. It's hard to spend so much. I mean, I spent so much money already on just the stuff, you know, between gear, crown quals, doing the things that I'm doing locally. It gets hard to swing that extra, you know, a couple $1,000s or whatever it really takes as a whole package to make it out of Alaska. But my impression is that our fighting isn't necessarily at the competitive level with other sword knights, and you know, how bad would it be if we started giving out those sword belts and we became a joke because our sword belts were so, subpar versus everybody else's? And then how demeaning would that be to folks if they did travel outside and, you were like, oh, I'm a sword belt from Northreach, and well, that means nothing, to everybody else, or everybody just starts laughing at you. Or just you bring up Northreach and everybody starts laughing because, oh, don't they just give out those sword belts to anybody who, beats a Shire level competition?
So I agree.
I think Northreach sets a lot of precedents. There's no reason that we should, just give out a belt just because, we need to know that we're on that level before we start seeing Sword Knights and Serpent Knights, and I guess Flame Knight standards pretty big to be a. Oh, maybe we don't. I mean, somebody who wants to get a Master Smith, like, what does a Master Smith event look like? Know what I mean? I think there's a lot of standards that we're not aware of because we haven't experienced them for the most part.
Right. For reference, I would like to consider myself up there in like the top 10, top 5 fighters in Northreach. But when it comes to clan or something, I get absolutely crushed every time. So like where we are in terms of our best in number wise from 1 to 10 is a hard measure.
Don't break yourself fighting, Deli. Words spoken from experience. All of my major life injuries are Amtgard related.
My hands just get torn up.
The trick is to be all broken and then get that level. That way you're really good. Because if you could do it if you had your young body, you'd be unbeatable.
What do you see, Ivan? When you wear 2 gas masks, you'll never have to worry about running out of oxygen.
Exactly.
Alright, hit us with another one. What else you got?
Hars, do we do another one, or you said like limit it because we're almost out of time?
We're over an hour in, so I would say if you got one more, go ahead and hit him with the last one, alright?
I got a bunch of weird ones. Let's go with this one. This is a good wrapper-upper.
Alright.
Where do you see Northreach realistically in a year? When you step down, where do you want Northreach to be, and in the major facets?
I want us to be a happy, unified, more oiled and efficient machine. Is where trivial things like internal communication are not an issue anymore. We, as a group, understand where and how we can find all the things that we need to, and if possible, and I don't know if this one is really achievable in a short 12 months, as ironic as that phrase may sound, working towards financial stability and independence. If we could make it so that our members don't need to be charged for things like participating in Amtgard, like site fees and stuff like that, that would be a beautiful thing to reach. And whatever method we use to get to that, whether that's a 501c3 route or some other alternative that presents itself between now and then, I believe that would be lovely.
My heart just melted. It's on the floor. It's a puddle.
All right.
Beyond that, in the coming years, we should focus on making sure that we have the best assets that we have available. Let's get to the point where we can have a trailer that's full of sail buffs in our castle, where we can go travel to different areas all over Alaska and do the same thing, and have a super sweet booth everywhere we go, and everything can just flow. I'm a big asset guy. I want to make sure that we have the tools at our disposal to where things can just start running themselves, essentially. All we got to do is make sure that everybody's on the same page.
Sounds like a good plan.
Dude, I'm so excited for next rain. Let's do it.
Hell yeah. Alright, well, while
1, 2, 3, go team.
Well, while Deli's looking to go clean his heart up, I would just like to say thank you everybody who's been watching up to this point. Hunter and Nalerian, thank you guys for sticking around. Hunter, you in particular, because I know you weren't even Like, you didn't really have to show, because this was just going to be, like, for our candidates for Monarch, but we appreciate you sticking around anyway.
Yeah,
My
absolutely.
My hands had to show up.
Fair enough. And Deli, thank you for stepping in and subbing in for Ray for my co-host this week. This has been good. You've been a good help for this.
I did the thing.
Yes, you did. Good job, Deli. Alright, well, everybody who's been watching, once again, thank you all for sticking around, and tune in next weekend when we'll be debuting the season finale. Until then, I'll see you in the next episode. I'm Hars, and you've been watching The Chopping Block. Have a good night, everybody.
Followed by heavy metal death growls. Metal.
Roar!